a story Rabbi Yael told, and here's the story as if I bring him. There was a famous writer and poet, Eliezer Steinman. Whole long story with him, and he's an Israeli, and he became a chassid and wrote beautiful poetry about the Rebbe and Chassidus, and published in the Kvar Chabad in Hebrew. Aside from poetry, he was a writer. So on one occasion, Rabbi Yael relates, he asked the Rebbe if it's okay to quote in a book that he's writing from a book, an apocryphal book, a book that is apocryphal. No, heresy is a strong word, but the heresy is not Torah. The ideas there are not Torah ideas, maybe contrary to Torah. So the Rebbe said to him, interesting answers. In general, I'm not a chassid of machlekes and the like. Which means in general, don't like to put a wall down and say this is out. But this is a book of kfir. It looks like it's a book that its theme is the denial of God or the divinity of Torah. So it's forbidden, and you should not quote from the book. Even what you're quoting is not a bad thing. But since it comes from this book, you shouldn't quote it. So sometime later, this Steinman is walking around the streets of Tel Aviv. He's and he meets his friend Abchanech Glitzenstein. Abchanech Glitzenstein was the person who was the Chabad writer in Eretz Yisrael. He translated the Rebbe's letters in Yiddish and Hebrew. He authored all the Sefer HaToldos and all the Rebbeim. He was a historian and a writer, wonderful fellow. So he sees that Glitzenstein is in a bookstore and he's looking at a book. And he was a researcher, he was a historian, a writer. So he comes into the bookstore. He says, this is the book that the Rebbe told him that he shouldn't quote in his book. And Glitzenstein is looking at it, perusing it. He sees that through the window. He sees that's the book. So he goes into the store and he says to Rab Chanoich, he says, he didn't tell him the story that he had with the Rebbe, he just told him this is a book of kfir, and you shouldn't, that's not a source you should be looking at. So Glitzenstein is arguing with him. Obviously, but he says, it's for research. He's not reading the book in order to be affected. He's arguing with him. So in the end, so Steinman tells him that this is the answer he got from the Rebbe. Oh, so Reb Chanoich, he said, if the Rebbe said so I'm closing the book and put it back on the shelf. Nice story, yeah? That's it. The discussion is over. Close the book. But so Steinman says to him, you're no chassid. You're not a chassid amiti. He said, if you're a real chassid, it's a very powerful story, friends. If you're a real chassid, then you would have known in the first place that this isn't not what the Rebbe wants. I wouldn't have gone this direction. What are you doing? This is all part of your work. It doesn't elaborate. He says, this is not a moment where you slipped up and you did that. Naved. You're doing this as a chassid. It's part of your. So you're doing this as engaged, as a chassid, as a researcher and writer. If you're really plugged in, then you wouldn't have gone here because you would just do you'd be faithful to the mission. So you got work to do. So Rabbi Yael, he told the story, he says, it's a beautiful story, it's very true. How strongly it talks to us now after Gimel Tammuz. And he says the Pell is also that this was a person that he came from a different world completely. He came from a very secular world. And he got the Nakuda. This is Bittul HaKeli. This is Mamash Bittul HaKeli. That the Keli is Magala the Oir. that if you're really plugged in and the Keli is really facing in the right direction it should be, then you're just going to know, no, this is it. You're just not going to want to go there. And you'll sense and feel that this is not where you should be looking. It's a powerful message for post Gimel Tammuz. I mean, the Rebbe himself directed it this way. As time went on in the last decades, he withdrew and withdrew and withdrew in the sense of directives and micromanaging and answering questions. He stopped it. He said, don't ask. Look in here, discuss it with 3 friends, discuss it. Be a chassid. Be a chassid. Be a chassid is in here, not a puppet manipulated from above. Certainly true after Gimel Tammuz, and it means we have the koiches, and this is the real Atzmis Dika connection. Have a wonderful day. I'm Sudas Tov. See you all tomorrow, God willing.
Thank you.